Back in the early 2000s, after years of begging, me and my brothers finally wore my parents down and were allowed to bring a video game console into the house for the first time. That console was a GameCube, with exactly one game included. We had very little experience with it, so as a kid, going through matches and seeing a new challenger appear was incredibly exciting. We never knew who was next, what brand new amazing character was going to appear that we could just spend hours messing around with and having fun. As we unlocked more and more of the roster though, a bit of a pattern started to appear. Clones, and lots of them. While we all still loved the game, I've got to say it began to become a little bit of a predictable letdown, and I always found myself wishing for something just a little more exciting. Of course, I obviously stuck with the Super Smash Bros. Series over the years, and as it turns out, a lot of these characters have become some of the most iconic, beloved Smash fighters of all time, which made Ultimate's decision to codify them under the Echo Fighter tag incredibly exciting. We had the potential for many more of these for years to come, starting with an incredibly natural fit and a long-requested character. Did this excitement pan out all the way? Let's talk. Right off the bat, I want to completely axe the notion that clone characters are bad for the game, which they're certainly not. Despite a misconception that I still see pop up regularly, clones don't quote-unquote steal a character's slot on the roster. Your choice was never between, say, Pichu or Isaac, it was between Pichu or no Pichu. Clones are generally last-minute additions that are included specifically because basing them off an existing character dramatically lowers the development resources needed to bring them into the game, meaning that they can be squeezed in as bonus content, where adding another fully fleshed out character is completely impossible. That argument's dead and buried, I don't want to hear it again. A more compelling one is that once a character becomes a clone, they're less likely to be given an original moveset in the future. This is somewhat valid, but over the years, essentially all recurring clones have been modified into or started out as what we'd call semi-clones, characters with distinct attributes who also have overlaps with another character which tie them sensibly to common source material. And Ganondorf. Because Ultimate includes every character from the series, that naturally includes every semi-clone, and looking over the roster, the results are pretty satisfying. Luigi is almost entirely decloned from Mario at this point, and the few overlapping points they have in common are clearly intentional, with different animations and properties. Animations are a key thing to look at here, for the record. According to Crowfall's lead animator, professionals will take a full workday to produce 3 to 5 seconds of content, so if you're seeing two characters performing a similar attack with different animations, that implies at least somewhat of a desire to tie their play styles together rather than solely saving on resources, since a lot of the legwork has already been done. Dr. Mario is much closer to Mario than Luigi is, but it's just Mario in a coat. It makes sense, and even then he's still a very different feeling character between his movement, special moves, combo tree, and the best back throw animation in the game. Similar statements apply to the space animals, PK boys, and to an extent the rodents and townsfolk, all of who have plenty of distinct animations and attacks that make them feel and play differently from each other. Ganondorf is getting there. I'm happy that Ultimate took further steps to declone him from his Captain Falcon origins, but he still feels very much like a melee revenant. I don't think Ganondorf released as a new Ultimate character would play anything like this, and I'd prefer to see him reworked entirely at some point. For what we are working with though...
That'll do, Pig. That'll do.
The links are a bit more nuanced. Adult Link was more of a template, all-encompassing version of the character in the previous entry, but in Ultimate he's blatantly based on Breath of the Wild, which gives him some clear distance from the other incarnations between his bomb runes, lack of a hookshot, arrows, and the like. Young Link almost fills in the role of the default Link now, with more quirks that capture the classic Legend of Zelda style, and although his moveset hasn't been overhauled that much since Melee, because Link's has over the years, they now feel very different from each other, even ignoring all of the character-specific changes introduced in Ultimate. Young Link is a bit too fast and small to really be the default Link either though, which gives us two very distinctive characters that both have plenty to contribute to the game. Toon Link I'm more lukewarm about. It makes sense to have that branch of the Legend of Zelda series represented, and he certainly looks the part, but considering Toon Link was originally introduced to be a more distinct semi-clone than Young Link, who he replaced in Brawl, it's a bit weird that he's consistently stayed so close to that original introduction. After all, he has a completely different body type than Adult Link, so those animations weren't just copy-pasted over, they had to largely build him from scratch, but still decided to keep him very similar to the original, particularly with his special moves. Apart from a few tweaks to his core characteristics, Ultimate only seriously altered his forward smash, and while it may have been a time constraint this time around, I think at some point in the last 3 games it would have made sense to change Toon Link's special moves to represent some of the other items in the series, which there are a lot of. The Gust Jar, Deku Leaf, Pegasus Boots, Hammer, Sand Wand, Rock's Cape, Wind Waker, Bomb Chews. Toon Link was intended to be a distinct semi-clone with unique animations right from the start, and it seems like at least some of his overlap with Adult Link has more to do with design choices I disagree with rather than just needing to get this thing out the door. But still, he's at least passably unique and does have a different game plan from the other Links, even if it's less different than I'd like, which means we've more or less covered the semi-clones and can move on to... Echo Fighters. Okay, it's not all bad news here. Let's start with the best. Ryu and Ken are obviously at the top, but realistically, they don't count. They're clearly semi-clones and only got slapped with the Echo Fighter tag because of their history. Which means the real kings of this category, in my opinion, are actually the Fire Emblem characters. Ironically enough, for all the complaints about the 37 different Marths in the game, they're actually handled fairly well in the context of squeezing as much content into Smash as possible given the time frame allowed. Melee Roy wasn't, really wasn't, but Smash 4 did an excellent job giving him his own identity and fighting style, and at this point he shares very few direct attributes with his source character. Admittedly, this was helped out quite a bit by being DLC and justifying additional resources due to the increased return on his development cost. Roy was never technically called an Echo Fighter though, but did become so distinct that he got an Echo Fighter of his own, Chrom, who is also handled fairly well. Now, he does have a unique special move, different particle effects, and some animation tweaks to remove Roy's distinctive reverse grip, but those are window dressing. I consider the real test of an Echo Fighter's worth to be whether there's a valid reason to choose them over their source character, and vice versa. And Chrom's uniform damage output compared to Roy's close-range sweet spots absolutely qualify in this regard. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this concept of an Echo Fighter's worth, because I'm not using it in quite the same way that I've seen in the past. So I'm still certainly not referring to stealing a slot on the roster, and I'm also not talking about, oh, there are too many competitive matchups to learn in my crossover fighting game celebration of Nintendo's history. No, what I mean is, if you hear that a character that you're interested in is going to be an Echo Fighter, and you have realistic expectations about what that means, are those expectations going to be met when you get to play the character for yourself? Now, as we're going to take a look at least to me, the answer is not always yes, but in terms of changing something as fundamental as a character's sword, yeah, good stuff. This completely changes the way you space with the characters and gives them noticeably different combo trees, which means it's easy to have a strong preference between the two, which is what we're looking for. Chrom's horrible recovery special is a boost to this distinction, but also an unfortunate side effect of it, since removing Roy's range weakness forces a balancing factor somewhere else in his kit. It certainly didn't ruin Chrom's competitive viability though, and apart from a few slightly rushed areas, he gets the MockRock seal of approval. And the same goes for Lucina, the picture of efficiency. She shares all of Marth's combat animations, but those attacks are almost entirely different because she once again uses uniform damage output across her sword compared to Marth's tippers. This again gives you a clear reason to prefer one over the other, Marth's superior combo game and high reward for spacing versus Lucina's more forgiving neutral game and consistent threats, and also creates some nice canon representation. Lucina spends part of her home game pretending to be Marth and uses the parallel falchion instead of the falchion, so it feels appropriate that she should adopt Marth's fighting style while the properties of her sword remain distinct. Chrom doesn't have nearly the same connection to Roy, but shares some of that lack of hesitation and willingness to charge forward into combat, which is what Sakurai originally modeled Roy's brawler style to emulate. And of course, being the father of Lucina who shares the same sword, it makes sense that he'd have a similar origin and defining characteristic in his Smash incarnation. If you're working within strict time constraints and need to implement a new character, as far as I'm concerned, this is how you do it. So up until now, this video has had a fairly positive tone, and fair warning, this is where that starts to come down a little bit, beginning with Dark Pit. I main this character. Okay, so I don't think Dark Pit is too far off the mark. While they only have 2 differing moves between them, their neutral and side specials, they do fulfill different purposes. Not nearly so much with their side specials, which essentially do the same thing in different ways, with Pits killing off the top and Dark Pits off the side. Sure, there are plenty of little quirks to list off. Ledge Jump Side B is more reliable with Dark Pit at low percents, but more dangerous with Pit at high percents. Pit can kill with a hard read off a juggle, while Dark Pit can with an edge guard. Overall though, these are pretty clearly almost the same move. The bigger difference comes from their bows, and this is the attack that really does offer a clear reason to prefer one character over the other. Pit's highly maneuverable arrows allow him to tack on damage repeatedly off stage and cover angles in a non-committal way that Dark Pit simply can't. On the other hand, Dark Pit's silver bow shoots much faster arrows with considerably higher damage and a more more favorable launch angle, which makes it a prominent part of his neutral game and a much more lethal offstage tool for the areas it does threaten. These do play distinct and separate roles. Dark Pit's origins as a literal Pit clone justify his clone status in Smash, and Silverbow slightly implies Dark Pit's canonical status as a sniper. However, despite the characters feeling more distinct compared to Smash 4's Pit and Bad Pit, I'm more critical of Ultimate's Dark Pit for one simple reason. He was in Smash 4. We're now in his second outing, and unlike Lucina, who already feels like a great take on the Echo Fighter concept, Dark Pit would have appreciated a bit more of an overhaul. I'm not necessarily saying this needs to be done by giving him new weapons or abilities, although that would obviously be great. We need to remember that Echo Fighters exist on the grace of being easy to add to the game. I do, however, think that they could have made some purely number-based changes between them. Compared to Pit, Dark Pit is more aggressive, sharp, and a stronger flyer in his home series, so it would be interesting to see him given higher air movement, a faster power of flight, and more damaging attacks. Pit, on the other hand, could be given faster ground movement due to the additional time he spends running in his own series, and could have stronger combo starters due to his more rigorous training. Small numerical tweaks like these could make the characters feel more distinct and imply some of their canon characteristics with very little effort, to the degree that they could easily be added in a balance patch, and to be honest, I'm kind of disappointed we haven't seen something like this already. Daisy kicked off the new Echo Fighter train, and while we didn't get any information on what changes she'd have compared to Peach, it marked an exciting shift in design philosophy that potentially opened the floodgates for tons of fan-favorite characters to be introduced with interesting quirks. And then the game came out and there was absolutely nothing. Okay, not literally nothing, but functionally close enough. Ignoring the differences which are completely visual, here are all the changes between the two princesses. Daisy holds her arms by her sides, making her horizontal hitbox slightly bigger. Daisy stands a bit lower, making her vertical hitbox slightly smaller. That's it. No, seriously, that's it. At one point, their turn-ups had different properties which actually did change their combos and edgeguard in game. Not much, but at least something to go with. And then it was patched out. Turned out Daisy was just using Peach's old Smash 4 turn-ups, and rather than embracing it as a distinction between the characters, Nintendo just considered it a mistake to fix, which is the exact opposite of what I'd hoped to see. Similar to, say, Young Link's jab, which became unique due to Link's progression over the course of the series, I wish they'd kept more of Smash 4 Peach's characteristics for Daisy, which would be incredibly easy to do while making her stand out a bit more. Peach's down tilt animation was changed from a swipe to a kick. Why not have Daisy keep the swipe? She's never had quite the same association with Toad, so why not give her the old throw animations that don't make use of him? I think these could be cool alterations that would be very easy to make, but as I said, those are window dressing. Let's talk substance. Well, to start, we know Daisy tends to be portrayed as more energetic and tomboyish than Peach. Why not try importing an attack or two from an older Smash entry, since Peach has gotten increasingly dainty over the course of the series in a way that Daisy could easily step away from. This admittedly may or may not work. Older animations don't always fit over the newer models perfectly, but surely we can find one or two that would go smoothly. We could also reflect this kind of energy, as well as Daisy's association with the Mario sports titles, through her attributes. Maybe she's a faster runner who deals more damage, or jumps higher, etc. This could be balanced out by weakening her float mechanic and recovery, which clearly are some of Peach's signature characteristics. Importing older animations wouldn't be excessive, and characteristic changes would just amount to a couple of lines of code being altered. As is, Daisy is just Peach, which is really underwhelming, but this can seriously be changed with very little work, particularly in comparison to our next character. Dark Samus confuses me more than anything else. It obviously took a ton of effort to bring this character to life, with brand new particle effects and many new animations, which, as I mentioned, aren't a quick thing to implement. So why did the team work so hard to create this amazing looking character who's visually distinct from Samus, only to have it play exactly like Samus? In all fairness, Dark Samus does have a few things to make it stand out other than visuals. Its rolls are faster but leave a larger target, smash attacks and projectiles hit lower, missile animations are more ambiguous, it has different hurt boxes when moving around, fire attacks have been mostly replaced with electricity, etc. Does any of this make a serious difference? Not really, outside of a few specific interactions, and additionally, does anything here give off the impression of the ruthless monster spawn from genetic fusion we saw in the Prime games? I'd say not. Within those games, Dark Samus has a heavy emphasis on floating and elaborate projectile attacks, which could be represented in Smash by increasing its air mobility, lowering its fall speed even further while keeping or even increasing its fast fall speed to compensate, and boosting the power of its charge shot and missiles. Samus could potentially be altered with, say, a faster running speed, better dash attack, and a stronger and more mobile Morph Ball Bomb. Note that when I say stronger, I mean stronger in relation to each other, so in the case of the pits, I don't think it would do any harm to interpret my words as just strict buff buffs, but for the sake of everyone's sanity, I think we don't need to be making Charge Shot better. This isn't really a balanced video though, and Echo Fighters are balanced in relation to their source character in comparison to against the entire roster as a resource saving method, which just makes things even more complicated. So for this time, just mainly focus on big picture stuff. I'm assuming that the balance factors would come in later. This would help emphasize their canon abilities, and would also let Dark Samus give a nod to the more methodical pace of the Prime games it originated from, while letting Samus feel closer to the more agile 2D Metroid games. It's honestly kind of puzzling to me that they didn't just go very slightly farther on Dark Samus and make it a semi-clone. They were so close. That said, I still can't deny all the hard work that got poured into Dark Samus, even if it was directed in areas that I find a bit strange. Which moves us on to our final Echo Fighter, where I've got to say some of that work is missing. Poor Richter. The reveal trailer for Simon was already awesome, but Richter's inclusion caught everyone completely off guard and really kicked off the pre-release hype for Echo Fighters. Upon Ultimate's launch though, underwhelming doesn't fully describe what we're working with. While he does have unique voice work, victory screens, all those little Echo Fighter touches, his combat animations are completely identical to Simon. All of them. And his distinguishing traits from his source character entirely come down to his wholly watered down B. Simon's is considered a flame attack, while Richter's is aura. Here's all the cases where this matters. Olimar's red Pikmin are hurt by aura, but not by fire. Some items explode on contact with fire, but not aura. That's it, that's the list. In almost all cases, it really doesn't matter which character you choose. The reality of Richter doesn't even slightly live up to that awesome reveal or the potential it promised. Because Simon and Richter are more of a blend that take techniques from each other's Castlevania entries, distinguishing them could be pretty simple. Buff the moves that they had first. Simon originated the distinctive whip strike used in his forward tilt and forward air. Buffed. Richter was the first to use this dash attack and down tilt. Buffed. We see Simon's stationary holy water instead of Richter's traveling iteration. Uppercut came from Symphony of the Night. Buffed. Same balance disclaimer as for Dark Samus, by the way. I loved Sakurai's embracement of the Echo Fighter concept and was incredibly excited for all the potential it offered, but I've gotta say, having actually seen a lot of the Echo Fighters come out and just be mainly glorified skins, my excitement has died for the most part. However, the good news is that not all hope is lost. As amazing as Ultimate is already, it's still actively evolving, with regular content updates and balance patches and even more characters announced past the initial 5 DLC we knew about. My pipe dream is that some of these characters include Echo Fighters, and now that they're downloadable content, which can have more resources dedicated to their development, we see some further distinguishing traits between them. My pipe dream to that pipe dream is that the existing Echoes we have are updated at the same time to more closely align with that philosophy. While I'd still certainly rather have Daisy, Dark Samus, and Richter in the game than not, forcing them into the exact same niches as their origin characters doesn't fully express their own stories and histories. Making any video game, let alone one with Ultimate's insane scope, is no small feat, and this video is not meant to undermine the extreme dedication Masahiro Sakurai and his team required to bring this project to fruition, or the work that still did need to go into adding life to each character. But even within the constraints of development, I think with just a bit more imagination, these characters could be fully brought to life. And with a bit of luck, they will be. Thanks for watching, everyone, and hey, if you liked it, why not leave a like? Let me know your thoughts on the Echo Fighters of Ultimate, as well as clone characters in general. It's an interesting topic. But before that, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more MockRock content. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. MockRock to see what I'm up to, and check me out on Patreon for exclusive content, including commentary on the creation of this video, to join the community on Discord, as well as for other cool rewards. Later, people! Now, as you might imagine, the roster size makes a video like this somewhat difficult, so I'm gonna have to keep the pace pretty snappy on these. To top things off, I'll have some guests popping by. We've just taken a look at the best of every Smash Ultimate move, and as difficult as that list was to make, oh my god, this was so much worse. Nothing like trying to analyze a big old pile of obscure moves.